Hi, my name is Oyama Vanto. I work with the Mandela Bay Development Agency as a project manager. My portfolio of work is within arts, culture, and heritage. The podcast wants me to discuss the relationship between the arts industry and how it interlinks with tourism, right? So I view art, I view creativity, I view it as a reflection of who we are as the people, first and foremost. And I view that creative industries is a tool that will reveal who we are in terms of our cultures, our heritage, as different people in a space and in time, right? That then presents itself to a whole range of opportunities in terms of how do we make our stories more appealing to those who are interested in knowing who we are, right? So maybe I must just backtrack a bit and talk about the current affairs in terms of tourism and what tourism is viewed as in the city, right? So all cities, especially the cities in South Africa, we suffer a huge blow of colonialism. Our cities are not a true reflection of who we are as the people. Now that is a huge assignment for those who are working in the arts and culture space, in that we rely on artists to tell the story of who we are as the people. So now we find ourselves trying to redress all of these colonial imbalances in terms of how we interact with the space, which is not reflective of who we are as the people. And you look at that at the colonial infrastructures. You look at the statues which are there, which are very big, bold, and looking down on the people. And so those are the kind of things that you then have to address. Now, if you bring now tourism into the picture, there's a language that there's a lot more tourists who are coming from outside of the city into our city, and they come to view all of these monuments, whether it's the Campanile Monument or it's the Donkin Reserves or it's Queen Victoria statues, etc. And there's a language now that says we shouldn't destroy what is a history of a place and a history of time. And I always want to remind people that our history as black people didn't start with slavery. We're far greater before slavery. We're far greater before any colonial visiting the cities. I know I'm going off the topic a bit, but I'm going to have to come back to it, right? So how I look at my responsibility as an official of the municipality working in this very complex space. Creativity is a very complex environment, and you have to have patience for that. My homework and assignment has always been, how do I turn around public spaces to reflect who we are in the truest sense of the word? Especially in the inner city, because a lot of us were moved from inner city to the townships. And so when we come to the inner city, we just come in here to work. We don't stay here. We walk through the inner city, but it's a space where there aren't enough true stories about who we are. Then there's a language that says, look, let's build our own historical monuments and tourism products where we are. I agree to some extent that we have to do that. We have to make the spaces that we live in more comfortable. They have to narrate who we are as the people. But for me, the biggest elephant in the room is the inner city, because that's where a majority of people were forced out. That is a huge. It's a huge heritage. However painful it is, a huge heritage of the people of the space. If you take for example South End, and how the forced removals of South End and how they've scarred the people of South End. It's one of those things that you just cannot forget. Now I'm coming back to the artists and how that interlinks with tourism, right? As I've said before, I think societies rely on the artist. So if you want to look at, if you want to know more about this, about the city or a space, you look at its walls, right? You look at the murals, you look at the artworks there. It tells a lot more about the kind of city you're living in. You look at the content of the musicians at the time. You look at the content of visual artists and filmmakers. You look at that's how you can tell the generation at the time, right? So for me, art is where I go to find culture, to find the stories and the heritages of the people. So artists carry a huge burden. So for me, I humbly respect artists because they carry a huge burden. They carry a huge weight on their shoulders because we see ourselves through them. So interlink between creativity and the arts and tourism, right? I think it boils down to the storyline. I think it boils down to the narration of the time and the place and the people. And I think we haven't even scratched the surface to unpack the kind of rich history we have, especially for me, I feel, in the Eastern Cape. And I think one of the biggest stories of the Eastern Cape is the 9 frontier wars of dispossession. I think we haven't even begun to unpack that those historical moments in the entire province. And the frontier wars which I fought in Algoa Bay at the time, we used to call Algoa Bay. So I think for me, we start this tourism product in the city. We started halfway. We don't start at the beginning. We haven't gone back to the beginning. We started when the colonialists were here. That's why I feel we are starting this thing. And we haven't begun to unpack what happened before. Who were people were living in Bucketsville, the president at the time? Those kind of rich histories. Yes, it still falls in line with tourism and creativity, but it tells the true, authentic story. So no wonder you see statues falling, because I think people are tired of being looked down, and I mean that literally. So if you look at the colonial monuments, they are big, they're towering. And if you look at the statue that we're doing, they're quite small in comparison. So it tells you a lot, And I think the artists are breaking boundaries in the storytelling environment. They're breaking boundaries in film. And creativity and tourism don't necessarily have to be a physical space. People will visit a space when they hear more about the stories that are coming from that particular space in terms of the music, the literature of the place, the films that come out of the place. People will come specifically for those things, not just because we built a monument. Then people must then come. So how we view tourism and the linkage between creativity and tourism should not necessarily be a physical building of anything. I think with the 4th Industrial Revolution now, a lot more people don't come to spaces because there is a building. They come because there's a story. And I think the people that are well equipped to tell the stories of who we are, those are the artists, those are the musicians, those are the writers, the filmmakers. That's where, again, and I go back to this point, those are the guys that carry the burden of culture. It's the artists. They have a responsibility of telling the stories. And what is weird, they are the least taken care of. It is always an afterthought by government, by officials, because there's a very serious lack of understanding of the impact of artists in our lives. If you turn off the TV, turn off music, remove the books, what do you have? You have nothing. So there's a very strong bond and very strong link between creativity and the artists and tourism. And I think if I look at the thread of connection there, it's all built around storytelling, authentic storytelling that reflects who we are as the people.